Hello, Bill. We're back again.
Yes. Good morning, Mark. I think it's still good morning. This is our second podcast today.
And no election result in the USA. We just keep waiting.
Oh, that's right. Well, do I want to know? I doubt that I want to know what's going on over there. But we're interesting podcast this morning with a young lady that's got Libby, which the listeners will find interesting when they listen to her story.
Yep.
And we've just sat down and worked out our timetable for a new podcast taking us up to the new year, because we'll go, as we said in our last podcast, we'll go to just before Christmas and then we'll have a break till February.
Then we'll have a break. We'll stop annoying people.
That's right.
And talking about annoying people, who we got on today that we've just annoyed?
We have, welcome John Sier, and thank you for coming on, John.
Thanks, Bill.
That's all right. I've let John down about 3 times. We've made appointments and things have gone haywire and we just haven't been able to get it together. And I just rang John 15 minutes ago and said, guess what? Are you ready? And away we go.
And he's obliged, which is fantastic.
That's
so thank
right.
you, John. So
yes, thank you.
To start the journey that we do, John, where was primary school?
I grew up in Mount Waverley.
Yep.
And so grade 1 and prep, I suppose it was in those days, was at St Christopher's School in Sindel.
Yep.
And then from grade 6, Mum and Dad saved up and put me through St Kevin's, which I spent my senior years.
And while you were at those senior years in high school, did you envision what you'd like to do when you finished school, or was that not on your radar at that stage?
Well, look, it was interesting. Dad took me in to meet his cousin, who was a Collins Street dentist, and he seemed to be very highly regarded and very skilled. And I, in fact, thought I wanted to be a dentist.
Oh wow! Okay.
In the final year of HSC. But fortunately for me, I didn't get the marks to get in. And looking back on it now, I probably consider that wasn't where I should have been heading. But it is so difficult in those adolescent years to determine what you want to do in your life and in your career.
And not many people do. No, we've had a couple of podcasts, John, where right from the very early days, we had a lady who's actually runs a couple of eyewear shops, and she had a passion for craft and art and all the rest of it from a very early age, and went off on a career and then ended up going back to what her passion was in the end. But when you're at St Kevin's, did you have any part-time jobs?
Yes, I did. Dad had a pretty strict work ethic on us, and I suppose an interesting story was when I'd finished my exams, Dad at the time had a power tool shop in Clayton.
Yep.
And I would be helping him out there, and I can recall him saying to me, look, you've got to get a job and earn some money. So at the time I was 17, and he drove me down to Home Pride Bakeries, and the big sign out the front said no vacancies, and it said anyone under 18 need not apply. So I said, Dad, it looks like they haven't got any vacancies, and in any event, I'm only 17. He said, that's for the other guys. Said, go in and get the job. Well, I went in and I got the job.
Very good. Oh, that's a good story.
So were you working on the production line, John?
So I was working on the production line. It was tough going, but I was working night shift, and so Dad would drive me down there at about 11 o'clock at night, and then I'd say, well, Dad, how do I get home? He said, that's for you to work out. So in the end, I'd work all night and then I'd jump on one of the bread trucks and help the guys deliver the bread to the milk bars, and the shops, and that was how I got back home again.
You made sure there was a shop near you.
That's right. So you did your HSC, as they call it, and you applied. Did you apply? So what made you apply for law and not dentistry?
Well, I did in fact apply for dentistry, but I didn't receive the scores that I needed.
Oh, okay.
And so a few of my buddies were enrolling in economics and law, and I got sufficient marks to get into economics, but not quite into law. And there was a procedure back then whereby you could do economics for the first year, and if your marks were good enough, you could transfer to economics and law.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's what I did.
Okay.
Good.
So your marks improved.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
That's right. And so, having gone through university, what was your first real job after you graduated from university?
I started out in the tax team at KPMG, or they were known as Pete Marwick back in those days.
Yep.
And they were had a strategy to recruit commerce or economics law graduates into their tax team. So I spent almost 12 months at Pete Marwick.
Was that good grounding for you?
It was good grounding, but it was, I suppose I felt that it was a dog-eat-dog type environment.
Yep. And,
at the time it was, the bosses there were pretty full on and extremely demanding, and not that was a bad thing. That was a good thing because I learned a lot.
Yep.
But I just didn't want to get to a point where I could see some of the older guys being treated not like I would want to be treated after 10 years in practice. And at the same time, an opportunity arose at Egan, Lobb and Walker, as it was then known. And they were based in Mount Waverley at the time.
Yep.
And so I had known that John Turnbull had gone there and just really knocked on the door and said, "Have you got a job?" And I did much the same.
John Turnbull, was he at school with you as well, I think?
Yes,
From
he
memory?
was.
Yes, I do recall that.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. You comment about the old guys. If you happen to read a post I put on LinkedIn last night, I talk about age discrimination. You might have a look at that, John. You might relate to it. But okay,
yes.
So you worked for the firm out in Glen Waverley, but you and two others at some stage set up your own legal practice called Mason Sier Turnbull. So can you tell us how that came about?
Sure. So Egan, Lobb and Walker, we started off and there was maybe 6 lawyers, and my bosses there and partners there were extremely entrepreneurial. So my role during those years or days was to look after the conveyancing. So I arrived day dot. I received a whole pile of files on my desk, and the senior guys would go out to lunch, and they were the days where it'd be lunch 4 or 5 times a week.
Yep, the good old days.
the good old days. It was a lot of fun actually when I eventually got to go out to lunch.
That wasn't the Notting Hill Hotel, was it, John?
Oh, we'd go there, but we used to go into the city, into Lynch's. We'd go to Lynch's quite a bit, and there was quite a number of different restaurants that we would go to. But the interesting thing was that we did a lot of business at those restaurants, and we came up with a lot of ideas, business ideas, and it was great for me because my partners were very entrepreneurial, and at the time they were doing apartment deals with Christopher Skase up in Cairns and Port Douglas, and they were developing Edrington Estate at Berwick.
Okay. Yep.
And so they were doing some terrific things and, taking risks and et cetera, and it was pretty exciting.
So what caused you to start your own?
Well, then moving on, in, I think it was 1990, we had a situation where one of the senior partners was probably doing less and less and probably lunching more and more and doing his own things. And so we had a chat to him at one point, and he, I think it was after an Easter break, he set up opposite us, the other side of the road. And it was interesting because, our best secretaries and any equipment that had been paid off seemed to end up with him. He was a lot smarter than I was and the others. And, and he set up over there. And look, to be honest, for his sake and for our sake, it was probably the best thing for him and for us.
Yep.
And so, at the time, obviously, everyone's huffing and puffing and looking at what action they can take. But to be honest, as I said, it was probably best for us all. And we decided that we would change the name to the remaining partners at the time.
Okay.
And it then became known as Mason Sier Turnbull.
Yeah.
And were they all schoolmates of yours, John?
No, they were really, other than John Turnbull,
Yep.
Heather Mason was our family lawyer, and she was very experienced, but and quite entrepreneurial, but probably not so much a risk taker as John and myself.
Yep.
And so eventually we decided to move out of Hamilton Place, which was within the Mount Waverley Railway Station precinct, and we moved to Ferntree Gully Road. Well, at that time, Heather was concerned that it was taking too much of a risk to get into a larger building, and with commensurate rent. So she then, at that stage, exited the practice, and there was John and myself left. And so that's where we found that we had some real growth.
And what did you specialise in, John? What was your main drive?
Franchising, primarily.
Yep.
I was involved in franchising in those days, and also commercial and corporate law, but and a little bit of tax and etc. Business transactions. But we were known for franchising, and I went with John to the international franchising conferences, and I can remember the two of us going to Washington in 1995.
Yep.
And I can remember us arriving, and because of the time difference, it's late at night, and we felt terrific, because so we're in a new town, and we're off to a couple of jazz bars and that sort of thing. And then the next day the conference started, and we had not quite predicted
the jet lag,
the formality. It was not even so much the jet lag, but it was the formality of the lawyers over there.
Yep.
And by 8:10, when we were going down to get our breakfast, still in our tracksuits, these lawyers everywhere are all dressed up in suits and red ties and raring to
Here
go.
comes the Australians. Was that the?
Yeah, I think it might have been. But it was quite interesting. And then I thought to myself, there was the first session in there, and the introductory session was given by Fred DeLuca from Subway. And it was just inspiring. And I don't know how, but I managed to get, there's 4,000 or 5,000 people in the auditorium, and I managed to get down the front and was shaking his hand and talking to him. And I recall saying how I was inspired by what he had said and how he had, sort of started from nothing to eventually have 38,000 outlets with, 8% royalty paid to him. I spoke to him and his lawyer, and I said, look, I think I can get us use some free advertising in our franchising magazine if we get a few photos. So his lawyer's taking photos of me and Fred, and I managed to get into the franchising magazine at the time. Well, we worked that relationship to such a stage that we ended up getting quite a lot of legal work from them in terms of employment law, in terms of IP and trademark registration work, and also various litigations. So, it was a great achievement, really, when I look back on it.
Well, I look back, John, and I know MST was the place that, because I had a little bit to do with you at that time. I was involved in franchising, and you certainly were the exemplar in franchising law. I remember quite well. And just by the way, John, it's amazing how the wheel turns. And I was functioned last week, I had a client that needed some franchising help just recently, and ended up I sent him to Tony Garrison, who's now based in Geelong.
Yes.
Right? It's a small world, isn't it?
It is a small world.
Tony's at Coulter Legal in Geelong, and he is, as you know, he's an expert in franchise law. But anyway, let's move on, because these days you are now actually running the family business. So you've given up the law and you've gone into running a company called SafeMate, which is a specialised business who manufacture non-slip, surfaces for all sorts of industrial applications. And a quick example would be in the oil industry, where you've got all these metal stairs and everything around the tanks, that you manufacture the anti-slip material that they put on stairs and in driveways and everything else. Have I got that right?
Yeah, look, almost. Our primary focus has been oil rigs and marine and shipping, and also general commercial industrial sites. Back in 1974, Dad used to work with the 3M company, and he was head of their abrasives division. And we as a family, spent a lot of time in Singapore and Asia growing up. And at the time, Dad was the Southeast Asian sales manager for 3M in their abrasives division. And so he had a background in sandpaper, I suppose, and abrasives. And he received a promotion where we were to go to Minnesota, and he wasn't keen on the cold weather in Minnesota, so he decided to bring us all home. And he was at a loose end as to what he would do next in his career. And he came up with this idea of producing anti-slip. And at the time, really, there was no competition, and there was very little anti-slip solutions other than the safety walk that 3M had, which was a stick down, abrasive, which you see now.
So John, were you involved in the business at any stage earlier in your career, or no? You were going down the law path.
Yes, I was. I've always been involved. in in those early days. In fact, I found one of our original accounting books here, where I'm doing the bank reconciliations back in 1975. So I would have been 15 at the time.
Okay.
Now, John, so it's a big transition from law, a career in the law, now moving in and running your family's little industrial company, which is got a unique product, I know. So, what have you found Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Have you found that you've had to have a major mental change in the way that you now operate?
Look, yes, but I have been involved in it for quite a while. But certainly, it's different to the extent that in law, generally, the customers come to you. You haven't really got, whilst there's competition, you're in a slightly different position relative to trying to sell a product. They're more inclined to take your call if you're ringing as a lawyer relative to ringing as a salesperson
Funny
selling
about
anti-slip.
that.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? They really need the anti-slip. It's far more important if someone falls down a set of stairs. The claims these days are just massive.
Yep.
And it's, we tailor a lot of product, and as I said earlier on, with oil and gas industry, that was the original areas that Dad had targeted to get SafeMate specified at quite a few of the oil rigs around the world and the oil companies around the world. So I look back on it and, I think to myself, gee, back then there was no internet. There was, he was just starting out, so he didn't have any money. We started out in the garage at home in Mount Waverley. And now, we're quoting companies all around the world.
It's a good story, isn't it? It strikes me that both you and your dad have that innovative entrepreneurial spirit in having a go. We interviewed someone the other day who said, we said, what's your mantra? And he said, be brave. And it keeps popping up when we talk to people. And both you and your dad obviously were being brave.
Yeah. That's exactly what Dad used to say to me. Fortune favours the brave.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah.
And he was certainly brave. He was a lot braver than me when I look back.
And do you supply domestically as well, John?
Yes, we do. Yep.
So
we're just as an example, like today, I've got a job coming in for a company, a metals company, that they make the trolley carriers for Coles and Woolworths.
Okay.
So there's 80 metal plates coming in that we will coat for them.
Okay. So how do people find you, John? What's the website?
The website is safemate.com.
That's SAFEMATE.
.com.
Right, yeah.
Correct.
And if people go to the website, which I'm looking at right now, it's fairly obvious what the product is, and there's quite a lot of information on there. And as I said, John, before, it's a hell of a lot different from legal to selling anti-slip product. But I just hope that you're sleeping well at night and you wake up every morning looking forward to going to work.
Well, look, I do, Bill,
Yeah.
and that's the interesting thing. And just reflecting on, because it's our 50th year in business this year, and I reflect upon what a terrific job Dad has done.
Yeah.
And how many lives or injuries would have been saved by this idea of his.
Yeah, that's a great way.
That's a great way to think.
Yeah,
and have you got kids that want to take on the business from you, John?
Well, no.
That's all.
Yes.
That's so that ends the 50-year business or 60-year business whenever it reaches the end.
Not quite,
Yeah.
because if we talk about succession and those sorts of things, which I think that you guys have discussed in the past.
Yeah.
Yep.
My thoughts around that are, I've always tried to get smart people in here,
Yep.
train them up, and not micromanage them.
Yep.
Let them do their job and get out of their way.
Yep.
And so I've got and rely on a couple of people here. And my thought process is, for this business to survive into the next 50 years,
Yep.
I really need to look at the people that are driving the business, to have them really take it on.
Yes.
That's
So-
good.
And
Yeah.
Still have
Yeah.
it as a family business, but it's for all intents and purposes, it's a family board really, and you just leave the business running.
Yeah.
I can certainly do that, but I'm more thinking about I've got the experience that they haven't in terms of business management.
Yes.
But ultimately, I need to get in making smart decisions and the ability to assess risk.
Well, that's good.
And-
Yeah, you're spot on there, John, because as Mark knows, I'm about to give a talk to the final year Marcus Oldham graduates at Marcus Oldham Agricultural College in Geelong, and my topic is succession. And if ever you want to know anything about succession, it's in farming families, and I'm sure you've seen that before.
It's
Yeah.
it's so important. And these days, particularly with second and third marriages, and the issues around estates and estate planning and that sort of thing. I mean, if I was to say, the business was left as part of the estate to be sold up, well, you just know that it wouldn't be in the best interests of anyone
Yep.
Yeah.
for that to occur.
And we just make a lot of lawyers rich, don't we, John? Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Bring it
right.
back in a
Exactly
circle.
right.
Yeah.
So, John, thank you. That's
Yeah.
been a fascinating journey, and I would never have picked that someone who started life in franchise law be running a non-slip business. So I think it's a great story. So
No, and thanks
you.
for coming on, John.
Thank
And I'm sorry it took us so long to sort things out, but we'll keep in touch, and I look forward to hearing this when we put it up in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and we'll let you know.
Yes. Great.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Mark.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Bye.